It is the 24th of May 2021 in South Boston here, Southie. That is the old headquarters of the famous Whitey Bulger, who was the Irish mobster that controlled Boston down to the Cape back in the old days. He ran the rackets. To the right here is public housing. They demolished the old nasty public housing and built slightly newer stuff. A lot of construction going on here. Just to the right hand side here, this is very typical of what Southie used to look like back in the 1980s. There's only small patches of older looking buildings like that left. Practically everything has been renovated and gentrified and made beautiful, and indeed made very expensive as well. In the old days, Southie was about 95% Irish American and 5% Lithuanian and a couple of more Slavs and a few other guys thrown in. It was a very insular area. Outsiders were not very welcome at all. We're coming to the intersection here where East Broadway on the right meets West Broadway on the left. So we're going to take a left here to go down West Broadway and going on into town. The fellow that I know was actually constructing that building there in front of us. He's been drastically curtailed, of course, with the COVID. That structure there, 3 stories, 4 stories, that's $18 million of a condominium project. Okay, I've changed my mind. I'm going to take a right. I'm going to go up East Broadway and go on into town from a different direction. I am driving my trusted Suburban, fairly big vehicle. It's got a bit of a power under the hood. Let's just give it a little bit of gas there to give an indication. I do not drive hard ever. I just take my time. Oops, watch out for pedestrians. Gotta let these guys go across. There's a huge bar there now called it's called Broadway, but used to be called something different back in the old days. I actually considered buying that a long time ago, before it was built out, of course. That's a monstrous place now. Probably has a capacity of 300 or 350 people. new construction there to the left. They would buy a couple of houses, demolish it, open up a site, stick up a condominium block, maybe 25, 30 condos. They'd be selling at about $650,000 each. Big structure to the right there, that's the South Boston Edison plant. They heat up water, turn it into steam and pipe it into Boston. That's how the older buildings would have gotten their heating. That steam would go right in through the radiators. In the good old days, that's where the cruise liners come in. No cruises for a while though. Take a little bit of a detour down here. Now as I drive down here, this is the Seaport District, and about 10 years ago there wasn't one single building down here. All this is built in the last 10 to 15 years. It's as if they built a complete new city down here by the waterfront. Apartments down here on some of these buildings are going for about $6,000 to $7,000 to $8,000 a month to rent. Now to the right there is original buildings. That's the only building that did exist back in the old days. In the old days, this was just a open lot, desolate area, a place that you would not venture into at all. It's still pretty quiet with the COVID. None of these buildings existed 10 years ago. See some gendarmes to the right hand side, so I'll put this phone down a bit. Bright lights, big city, but not that big. Population of Boston itself is about 700,000 people. Metropolitan area 3.5 million. James Hook to the right. That's where people go to get the famous lobster roll that Boston is somewhat famous for, among other things. Now as I travel along here, there's a nice greenway to my left called the Rose Kennedy Greenway. And underneath us here, about 25 feet down or whatever, there's 4 lanes of traffic in a tunnel heading north, and across the way there's a similar 4 lanes of traffic obviously heading south. Before that was put in, of course, there was an elevated highway here called the Central Artery. I think I'll take a left here on State Street. This would be a small street, but the main street in Boston, really. Got a very famous pub here to the right hand side, the Black Rose. Every Irish guy worth his salt would have frequented at some stage or another the Black Rose. A lot of people I knew actually worked in the Back Rows, and perhaps by hook or by crook got enough money to buy their own place from the Back Rows. Little quaint building ahead of us there, that's the old State House, built in 1713. Proclamation of Independence was read from that balcony back in July 1776. Just in front of it there, the location of the Boston Massacre, March the 6th, 1770. King's Chapel to our left, King's Chapel Burial Ground into our left. Oldest burial ground in Boston, dating back to 1630. People out in the street now, coming out of the Parker Hotel. That's where JFK proposed to his beautiful wife Jackie. Many more as well, perhaps. Granary Burial Ground coming up on our right hand side. John Hancock, Samuel Adams, Paul Revere, etc. buried in there. Now I'll finish up here because I'm just taking a right and we will see the Massachusetts State House up here on Beacon Hill. Dating back to 1798, that building. Beautiful Corinthian columns. That architect, very famous guy called Charles Bulfinch, designed that building. Did work on the Capitol building down in Washington DC as well. Okay, well that's it. Thank you for watching.